Embedded finance is usually all about payments, banking, lending, investments, and insurance. However, there are adjacent areas evolving with the same logic, and embedded accounting is one of them. The basic idea is simple. Small businesses already spend their day in tools like vertical software as a service platforms or their SME bank. Embedded accounting brings the bookkeeping data into these tools instead of keeping it in a separate system the business owner only opens once a month. In this podcast episode, I speak with Mark Holleman, co-founder of Thread. Mark is actually a returning guest. The last time we spoke, we talked about embedded lending and the complicated build versus buy decision many companies face. His first startup, the lending provider Sprinque, had just shut down. Now, Mark one of his Sprinque co-founders, Manoj, have started Thread. They're building the layer they wished existed when they offered lending products. Underwriting SMEs is pretty hard when the books are weeks or months out of date, and that is the gap Thread is trying to close. We talk about what embedded accounting actually means for a vertical software as a service company, how AI agents and human bookkeepers work together in practice, why scaling accounting across 5 European countries is harder than it sounds, and whether this is also the data layer that finally makes embedded lending work. My name is Lars Markl, and I'm the founder of Embedded Finance Review. Embedded Finance Review is a newsletter, podcast, and event series covering the European embedded finance ecosystem. If you're exploring an embedded payments, banking, or lending product for your platform or service, I offer free intro calls where I share honest feedback and connect you with the right providers and partners. If you're interested, you can book a call via my website, embeddedfinancereview.com. And before we start, a word from this episode's partner, HoPay. Embedded accounting, embedded payments, embedded lending. All of these only work when you can trust who is on the other side. Identity is the layer underneath all of it. HoPay is the identity infrastructure layer for the internet, connecting government identity systems worldwide so businesses can verify users across markets through one single API. Right now, most online identity verification still relies on document photos and facial biometrics, which were never really designed for the internet. HoPay replaces that with eID verification, which is more secure and is increasingly required under regulation such as eIDAS 2.0 in Europe. If you're building financial products and thinking about how you onboard users, check out HoPay. That's HOPAE.com, or check the link in the show notes. And now, let's dive in. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, and in what part of the world are you located right now?
Hi, Lars. Thanks for having me back. I am doing all right. I am based in Amsterdam, in sunny Amsterdam. Not really, but sunny.
Nice. And you did say already, thanks for having me again. Some listeners will know, and you are going to be the first one on my podcast who appears a second time as a guest. So thank you for joining me again. It was a couple of months ago, or like last year, I think, when we recorded an episode around the topic of embedded lending, specifically the buy versus build motion of launching an embedded finance product for non-financial brands, but maybe also for fintechs. Obviously, before that, you were a founder of Sprinque, a company actually operating in the space, helping other companies to offer lending products. Now, already in the last episode, Sprinque was in the process of shutting down. So obviously that chapter is closed. Now we're going to talk about something very different. Still embedded, but not embedded lending anymore, but embedded accounting. And people who know me well will probably say like, okay, embedded accounting, it's not really embedded finance. It kind of sits a little bit out there, but obviously we all know there's a lot of similarities and things we can learn from that. But maybe to kick things off, we're going to talk about what you're doing with Thread and a few more details, but like high level. Earlier we're doing lending, now you moved into the accounting stack. What was the main reason, the main driver for you to focus on this new vertical?
It's a good question. As we built Sprinque, the previous startup that I ran, we noticed just how out of date and how old-fashioned still the whole process was of doing your administration and keeping your books up to date and basically even building your whole finance stack, and how the finance stack and the finance setup fails, if the foundation isn't there, if the data isn't correct, isn't in the accounting system, all the stuff you do above it, all the things you try to do, forecast your runway, build models, get insight into your spending and so forth, all of that fails if the foundation isn't there. And typically books are updated once a month or even once a quarter when you need to do VAT filings. That means you're kind of flying blind in the period between now and that date. So that was one side. And the other side, of course, we were underwriting small businesses, and we just realized how difficult it is to get up-to-date financials on small businesses, on SMEs. So that's kind of the problem we saw from both sides. And that's why we decided, me and Manoj, to focus on this problem specifically.
And we're going to talk a bit more, of course, later on what exactly embedded accounting means. I guess listeners to this podcast who know the embedded finance world can imagine something about just going companies like SaaS companies, vertical SaaS companies who can embed accounting features. But coming back to the answer you said before, you saw the problem. Was it immediately that you thought about, okay, embedded accounting is a solution to this problem? Or how did you arrive at that one?
Yeah, it was kind of came in a process. We noticed the problem was there. We noticed it over the 4 years that we built Sprinque. And as we got bigger, we also switched accounting systems from Yuki to Exact, and just changed bookkeepers and got external controllers, part-time controllers in to help us make sense of all the data and get it up to date. So the problem was always there, but at some point it just clicked, especially when we started to think about how do we solve the problem for those smaller businesses. Not per se for bigger companies or bigger SMEs, but really the small ones that under $1 million a year revenue or under 500,000 a year revenue. How do you reach those companies? And do they really then need a standalone tool? Because basically SMEs are already known that they have to operate a number of different tools to manage their business. Or is there a way to simplify their lives and bring also the accounting to where the data already is? For example, vertical SaaS and SME banking are perfect channels for that because businesses already use those tools on a daily basis. They already manage their businesses, especially for vertical SaaS. They manage their business there. The operational data is there. So it made a lot of sense to say, okay, why don't we bring the whole accounting and bookkeeping functionality into that environment rather than have a separate solution? It's also possible as a separate solution, but there is a benefit to having it where especially these smaller businesses already work every day and manage their day-to-day operations.
We did mention already the case of like a vertical SaaS, potentially using one piece of software, often referred to as like business critical software, most likely an ERP or a similar kind of service, which obviously by definition contains a lot of data, a lot of financial data. Or similar example you gave with SME banking is probably for a different type of companies or even the same type of companies. Another software that has all these informations, but maybe just for all of us to understand like very clearly, what does it mean when these companies embed accounting? I'm guessing we can maybe take an example of a vertical software as a service provider today using a business critical software like an ERP and accounting on the side, versus the same company now doing it embedded. What is obviously the difference is using one tool instead of two, but maybe you can a little bit more around that. How does it is in the user journey and the feature set you have also inside of your software?
Yeah, so it's essentially, it means, let's say you have a vertical SaaS, a yoga studio management platform, where you schedule your meetings, you have your team members, you schedule the classes and so forth, you do the invoicing to your members, etc. So you already have all that functionality there. But now normally that data would then have to go out of that platform to whatever accounting or bookkeeping software your accountant uses or you use. Not always that connection exists, so you would have to manually download the data from the platform, send it to your bookkeeper, who then manually uploads it into the accounting software and then does all of his or her processes from there to create the journal entries. So the difference here is that we have a set of APIs that we give to the platform. They can send all this operational data to us. We then also have an SDK, a front-end element, which you can drop inside the product. So you can see all your transactions there. You can connect your bank accounts there. You can basically see all the reporting there, all the insights on your performance. You can see it all in one place, and the data gets updated in real time. So it's not that you have an insight into the financial position of your company once a month or once a quarter, whenever you send this data to your bookkeeper, and whenever they then upload it and do the reconciliation and all the bookings and everything. But this is continuous. So first of all, you get better insight. All the functionality is in one place. And that's very interesting also for, let's say, that yoga studio platform, that if somebody wants to start a yoga studio, they can go to that platform and have a business in a box concept. They can get the whole business set up in one place from one provider, and they don't have to worry about setting up 2, 3, 4, 5 different things. but they can do everything in one place. So that's the benefit there. So what we mean is we have a set of APIs. We get all that data continuously. We run your bookkeeping and your admin in real time, your back office automation in real time. You get the reporting back. And if there's any gaps or anything is missing, we make little flags, little tasks inside the vertical SaaS interface, where you can resolve these things. So let's say you bought something and you didn't upload the receipt. There's immediately a little task created saying, hey, we see that you spend this money, but we don't have a receipt, so we can't complete the process. Can you please attach it here? And then we take care of it. So you can have basically continuous updating, continuous bookkeeping, and real-time insight. And that's really the benefit. As a first step, that's really the benefit.
And these examples you provide right now, I've seen it in the past dealing in my times in open banking and also embedded banking very often with accounting, bookkeeping, kind of like services. Obviously, people who have to deal with it on a daily basis know exactly what it means. A lot of people also sometimes it's like a very vague term, like what does it exactly entail? But I think, as you mentioned right now, maybe you can give a couple of examples what your software precisely does on top of the data. You mentioned our reconciliation, receipt collection. Is this kind of like typical services? And where does your service end at the end of it?
Yeah, so we do essentially full service bookkeeping and accounting. So that means your bookkeeping, your VAT returns, as well as your annual filings, if they are required as a company, your annual accounts and your corporate income tax filing. So we handle all of that. And we base that all on that data that is updated in real time. So the model becomes much more efficient in the sense that it is done automatically. So this is this whole concept of services are becoming the new software, that you can take the software and the human services on top and basically replace them with a piece of software that saves everybody time and money. So that is basically what we do. We take all this data, we do your books. So if there is an invoice, we extract all the line items, we create the journal entries on a line item basis so that you really have a very granular basically setup of your books or insight into your books. We match the transaction to your bank accounts, which you can also connect through the interface. So we get all the bank transactions, we get all the operational data. There we do the reconciliation, and based on the types of transactions, we create the correct journal entries in a chart of account which is configured to your business or your industry, your vertical. It's not that we have one standard chart of accounts. The chart of accounts can be specific to your vertical or specific to your company even. And the ages, because it's obviously an agentic platform that sits in the background, it does all this work automatically. It gets the context. So for example, it has a receipt for coffee. It will read the name from the receipt that it is from a certain coffee place. It will do a web search to find that, so this place is actually a coffee place, so likely this was a coffee purchase, if it wasn't already obvious from the receipt itself. And then it knows where to exactly which account to book this transaction. So that's what it does. Basically, it's automated bookkeeping, your VAT returns, annual accounts, and corporate income tax, and it's all handled in one solution.
Interesting. And obviously with Thread, you just started recently, and I guess we mentioned a couple of areas already, vertical SaaS, neobanking, plus you're based in the Netherlands, but of course a lot of maybe other European countries as well. How does your go-to-market look like? What is, in terms of like countries and maybe sectors, who do you think is your target with such an embedded accounting solution for phase one?
Yeah, for phase one, we currently have built the platform to work in the Netherlands. That is our home market. That's obviously where we are based. We have a go-to-market in basically two approaches. One is direct. So we do also work with companies directly, and then we connect all of their external systems and data sources and WhatsApp and Slack and email accounts and everything to pull in the data and also provide the same service, essentially, to automate your bookkeeping and then do all these accounting processes and filings. And then there is the embedded approach, which we have. We designed a model that is the benefit of this agentic AI age, is that you don't need to rebuild your entire software to go to a new country and code and all the different accounting rules, the different tax rules and so forth. Basically, we call it the Uber stack. So we create one stack. We have our general ledger, then we have our bookkeeping automation layer, then we have our intelligence layer. And we can just take that whole stack, launch it in a new country, basically localize the context. So we put in local accounting guidelines, local tax guidelines, and so forth. We also still have humans in the loop, just to be very clear. This isn't an autonomous system that you plug it in and it will just do all this automatically. There are still humans in the loop. And then they obviously, over time, these human experts, they teach the agents on edge cases, etc., on specific situations, and the agents get smarter and smarter. So that's also how we launch in new countries. We will work with local human experts, and they will configure or teach the agents how to handle cases in each country. And then we can go from country to country. So our ambition is to be pan-European, and we're starting to look now at the next country just to prove that the model works. how we roll out from one country to the other. But for now, we're live in the Netherlands with our first customers.
And you did mention already also that you choose like a dual approach, a direct-to-business approach, and also the embedded approach. Maybe from my reading from the outset, obviously, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. Obviously, I guess the company's thread was built around the embedded case and making that really work. But I'm guessing also closing the first deal is not always something that happens on day one or day two. And obviously, specifically these companies, I mean, I know it from my, not embedded accounting, but other embedded ventures in the past, that obviously companies that you want to sell to look for a certain kind of confidence that you can really build the product, that you really know what you're doing and not just on paper or theoretically, but really doing this with actual customers. And I guess this is where also from your side, the direct customers feed in, probably maybe not something you potentially want to focus on in a year or 2 years, but definitely or might likely help you in the phase to get started to convince platforms that your service is appreciated and adds value to these companies.
Yeah, we see it as an approach that will stay, that we will continue to work direct and also with bigger companies. So we see the bigger use case on the embedded side is working with the smaller businesses, whereas the platform to go direct is more geared towards slightly bigger SMEs. So that's how we kind of thinking about it. The small ones, we go via embedded partners, and the bigger ones, we go direct. Or we can do also embedded, that is also fine, but at least for direct sales, it makes sense to go after the bigger ones. It does take time to get a platform to trust your product before they put it in front of their customers. It's a new concept, embedded accounting in the US. It's been around for a while. You see companies like Layer and others that have been building here for a couple of years and already been very successful. But Europe is a different environment. It's more fragmented and people want to see first that it works and be able to trust it. And that's a great way to do that, is to just go to businesses directly and work with them. It's also good for us because we have immediate feedback from them on what they like, what they don't like, what they see is missing, and so forth. So it's a logical approach for us, certainly at this stage of development, and we'll see how that plays out in the future.
And you did also mention in your previous answer the term agentic and described a little bit like how your software operates, also how our humans are still in the process involved. Maybe I'll just, again, like for people who are maybe not so deep into the topic, just for us to understand a little bit better how the whole stack look like, right? I mean, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a business owner who uses, a digital business owner who uses today already a digital solution. I see it here in Germany very often. There are kind of like digital solution software for invoicing, for a lot of the other things. And then typically on top of it sits the traditional bookkeeper, the tax advisor, who basically receives all these receipts and then makes the necessary steps. From what I understood you from your previous answer is that with a vertical software as a service solution where maybe parts of the invoicing is already included, but then thread on top of it is embedded accounting is covering the whole offering as well, in a way with lesser humans. You still say there are humans involved on your side, which I guess is also maybe it's also required for the product, but maybe also very much for the sales and for the customer side to understand that I'm not sure in the Netherlands, but specifically in Germany, might be some people a little bit afraid if they have to trust the machine fully with their taxes, but they say, I rather want to have somebody to look on it. But is it describing it well enough for you, or how would you phrase it?
Correct. I think AI and agentic AI, it is just a series of agents and workflows, and you have different workflows for different tasks, and it goes through different phases, like when you receive the document and you have to understand it and extract the information, enrich it, get the context, then move it to the next, and so forth. So it goes through a workflow, and there is agents in those workflows that perform these specific tasks, which otherwise could be that they're done by a bookkeeper, for example. They will open the document, they will read the document, they will see what is there, what is the vendor's name, what is the VAT amount, what needs to be booked where, and so forth. Some accounting softwares also do that, of course, themselves, where it will also, document extraction has been around for some time now, and it is quite accurate, but it is continuously doing this process. And what also for us is that it automatically gets the information. So you could connect also your Gmail account, for example, and it will find the invoices and receipts and so forth, whatever is there that you get from all your software vendors. It will pull those in itself. So you don't need to manually go do that. And then it will extract the information and book it and match it to the payment and so forth. So the human doesn't have to get involved. We assign a confidence score to every process we do and every journal entry that comes out of it at the end. And of course, if the confidence score is low, let's say 50%, we're now at the range, we have 50 to 98% confidence scores. Of course, we first look at the 50% ones and then slowly, and we teach it, we fix it, we agree with it, or we change it. And then the agents learn from that, and slowly that confidence score will go up. And so What we see is not that you eliminate the tax specialists or the accountants, but that you, instead of saying we have one accountant or bookkeeper per 20 companies, you might see that one per 200 or one per 300, because they can just work much more efficiently. They can immediately, or they don't have to worry about all the kind of the boring manual admin work. They can also with AI, of course, and once you have all the data, they can much more easily answer questions or get the context of the business. But slowly, all these tasks, to a large extent, can be automated. We are even now creating agents where they will look at your numbers and will find categories that are missing. So, for example, as a business, you're likely to have a communications cost every month, or maybe your mobile phone bill, or maybe it's more than that. If you don't book those costs, then you will get prompted and will say like, hey, you don't have communication costs, but remember, you're a business, you're allowed to expense your phone costs for your business, for example. So it will prompt things when we see things that are, so the optimization even there, you can even prompt, of course, the bookkeeper or the advisor and say like, hey, these are the things to look at because this business isn't doing that, or you can prompt the business directly. It's making their jobs much easier and easier to digest the information and give value back to the business. So we see that more as a trend of one bookkeeper, accountant, tax advisor to 20 companies going to about 300 companies. And that's really the benefit. So we don't really see the human disappearing completely, but we just see this getting much more efficient.
I guess the way you described it is quite applicable to a lot of areas and industries where AI and agentic solutions are being adopted. How do you see, let's not call it purely traditional, but companies, I mean, obviously you are a newly founded startup. Obviously for such companies, it's always a bit easier to adopt these new softwares because you start on or these new solutions, these new trends, these new capabilities, because you start on a green field. Other companies who have been around for a couple of years probably is a bit harder for them. Do you have a sense of, like, maybe not your direct competitors, but generally in the accounting, finance and space? I mean, the examples you mentioned right now, it's quite logical, right? I think for anybody out there, the communication bill, the coffee receipt that you said earlier, I think for anybody who hears them, it's like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And pre-fill maybe data from the receipt. Obviously, they've done before, but maybe even now also through web search, getting data that's maybe not visible on the receipt to fill out the missing parts, maybe even connected to the calendar entry and seeing who I had a meeting with at the time I bought the coffee, and maybe making this information in there as well. I guess for anybody listening to it, like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And my first guess would be like, the other companies probably will do this at one point as well. Do you see that happening, that these things are already being adopted, or is it still a bit too early for that?
Yeah, I don't see it so much yet, because it's up to now, it's very much the role of the person, especially when you look at the smaller companies. And of course, the bigger the company, obviously, the more professional, most likely the setup already is. And they have specialists working within the company that do this. But if you have smaller companies that can't afford to hire a finance director, or don't want to hire an admin person, or somebody who helps with that side of the business, they basically, the owner or the founder, have to do it themselves. And they work with an outsourced accountant or bookkeeper to support them. Typically, it's the human that will identify, if it's a good bookkeeper or good support administrator, they will identify these things and notify the company of what they can do. So you get some, of course, bookkeepers are very good, others are not as good. You get a variability in the service quality. But I think with AI, it's possible to just be much more consistent, to be much faster, to be much more consistent and much more proactive. So, for example, one of the things also we're doing is, even when that receipt is missing, as soon as we see the bank transaction that you bought lunch, let's say, and you're allowed to expense it, you bought it on your company account, but we didn't get the receipt in, that we can immediately send you a WhatsApp and say, don't forget to add that receipt. We see that you went to this restaurant, but we don't have the receipt. Take a picture now, put it here in WhatsApp, and we'll book it for you. So you can become proactive and to help them keep their books up to date. So the big difference also is, where we really want to go, is that this is all happening in real time, not once a month, not once a quarter, or in some cases even once a year, but in real time. Because once you have the data in real time in the platform, you can start offering this intelligence on top. You can start giving this kind of value back to the business, which is something where we really struggled with accounting software, which is far removed from the business. It is really built for accountants. It's built for compliance and annual reporting and so forth, or quarterly reporting if you want, or maybe even monthly reporting if you're lucky. But it's not meant for really day-to-day business decisions and proactively helping you manage your business. So that's also where we see this going. It isn't just about automating one task over another task. It is, what value can you then give back? Once you've saved them time for the company, and once you've saved them money also, because there's less manual work, what value can you then give back in terms of intelligence, in terms of prompting them, saying you have bills due next week, but you don't have enough cash to pay them, but you also have these overdue receivables. emails already pre-prepared to the customer to prompt them to pay their invoices so that hopefully you get paid quickly so that you can then meet your obligations next week when you have to pay these vendors. So you can become proactive. So that's the next level. Once you have the data and in real time, then that's what's possible as the next step.
I think it's important to, obviously it's quite clear with embedded accounting, but to repeat, obviously, that's all the benefits you enable then another software company to do, right? Because I'm guessing nowadays, like some of the features you described are, okay, they are available here and there in tools, and it's not completely the first time that you heard a company reminding you to put a receipt when you just had a bank account transactions. But again, this might now happening in the tool that you have to use because this is an industry-specific solution, which has the tailored offering for a lot of parts that are really, really relevant for you, and you cannot potentially choose another provider because it has all these accounting features, because obviously it might not fulfill your industry needs.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this also in the market, like there is this convergence of banking, accounting, and financial workflows. You see all the banks or the SME banks, they're trying to add more functionality to help SMEs with their administrative tasks. So banks like Conto and like Revolut and Mercury in the US, and you see them moving into this space. And then you see accounting softwares adding bank accounts. And then you see vertical SaaS also, of course, embedding financial products. So everybody is trying to become this financial, operating system or financial layer for SMEs. But the problem is none of them have all the data that they need. And it always remains a piece, like a part of the solution. And you will always still need other tools to have the full financial management of your SME. And so by embedding accounting in there, you actually really can get much closer to becoming the full financial operating system for your group of SMEs. Once you have all the data there, you can then have the extra revenue, you can have the extra retention of customers, you can start enabling more informed lending decisions and so forth. Once you have all the data in one platform where the user keeps coming back, right? It's not a tool they come to once a month or once in 2 months, but they come back to that tool every day because all the functionality is in one place. And that's really the goal, or the North Star is like, who can create this product where everything comes together for the SME and where real value can be given back to the SME as a result of it. And that's what embedded accounting enables.
Of course, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned it, right? I think we have seen it in fintech in general, but also I think generally like in tech, these kind of like, okay, some from different providers are adding features from the other side, and then kind of like who's in the best place to bring all of it together, right? Arguably vertical software as a service companies exist because they believe for a specific industry, they can provide the best solution. And quite frankly, everything or anything that a vertical software as a service company doesn't do today is most likely either they didn't have time yet to build it yet for this target group, or maybe it's just too complex, too complicated to build it, and they need the right providers. This would be now maybe the pitch for the embedded accounting solution. But this is the sole reason vertical SaaS exists, right? To maybe not everything, but at least around like running the business, communicating with customers, all these core features, including accounting, bookkeeping, invoicing, finance, lending, and so on, comes from one tool. Because quite arguably, I think that's the same case for bookkeeping, high level, and banking. There's literally no reason why you should, besides entry barrier, there's no other reason why you should be using two separate tools for doing something which is so tightly connected. It should come from one hand, because transferring data from A to B just to do something else you can do in tool A already, it doesn't add much value.
I fully agree. And you see, like a vertical SaaS, of course, it's very vertical specific. Obviously, that's the whole purpose of that platform, or such a platform. And that fits certain businesses. Like if you are a yoga studio or an experience host or a tattoo studio or a plumber, or like there is tools literally for every vertical you can imagine. Even we recently found there is one for pool cleaning businesses. There is a vertical SaaS solution for that. And so every industry has them. And obviously that works for those kind of businesses very well. They're probably not going to use Conto bank account. I'm not picking on Conto, but I'm just picking them out to manage the financial side of their business. They will have their bank account and they will go for their day-to-day stuff to the vertical SaaS. Other companies that don't have really a vertical SaaS, most startups will not be working on a vertical SaaS platform. So they will have multiple tools, a separate bookkeeper and accountant with their software, a separate bank account where they can do some of the workflows, and hopefully they can connect the two and kind of create a kind of a solution. And so for those kind of businesses that don't have a very specific vertical or don't have a very specific vertical solution, the banks can fill a nice void and bring more functionality to their customers. And vertical SaaS do it for businesses where it makes sense to work with a vertical SaaS solution. So I don't think there is one product that's going to cover everybody's needs and win in every vertical. I mean, there's 32 million SMEs in Europe. There's not going to be one product or one solution that's going to conquer them all or going to fit all of their needs. So there will be different solutions. And I think that's the beauty of embedded accounting, is that you can put accounting in what for whatever vertical makes sense. That's where you put accounting, and that's where you create a complete business in a box solution. And same for SME banks that serve different verticals or more vertical agnostic type solutions.
Interesting. In an earlier answer, you did mention already a company from the US. I think it was Layer, who is also building an embedded accounting solution. I guess the US is a logical country to look to, but while you were in the process maybe of like identifying the embedded accounting for you to found the next business, plus of course eventually founding then Thread, did you look around into other countries, specifically the US, but maybe also other parts of the world, to see if there are already embedded accounting solution to kind of give you some kind of, let's say, reassurance that this is an area that other smart founders see as well to go into?
Yes, it is a very new space. The US in this regard is also leading it. I mean, it is obviously also the leading software as a service market, and it has all these niche solutions. And it just makes sense that they're obviously willing to try things more quickly and more easily. And it just makes sense to say, like, we offer a new value to our customers. We don't have to build it. It increases retention. It increases conversion. It gives us a new revenue stream. Fantastic. Let's do it. Here, it works a little bit differently. There are some of the more legacy players are trying to do it. Sage, for example, in the UK has an embedded proposition. I think they partnered with HSBC in the UK and some other SME banks. So it is coming and people are experimenting with it. I don't know firsthand how good their solution is and whether you already need to be a Sage customer to then use the functionality in your banking portal. So yeah, we see some parties trying to build it themselves, and we heard some of them are regretting it, including some legacy banks. For example, in the Netherlands, it said like, we have something, we're not happy with it. We're not the right company, or we're not the right team or people to build this kind of functionality and to innovate on it. We rather partner with that. And so we see there is a need for it, but it is an emerging space, but it is part of a longer trend, I think, of this convergence of the more functionality you can put into one tool. And then whoever has the best tool to fit for purpose, if you like, will win that segment of the market. But it's coming also here. But we don't see a lot of startups in this space in Europe.
Yeah. Well, was there anything specifically in the US from the companies who are operating it that you could take away where you see like this could be helpful for us here in Europe as well to understand? I mean, like for you building the business, or does it feel like a completely different world because of different market, different requirements, different accounting and so on?
Obviously we had to build our own general ledger. I mean, we didn't have access to their product, so we couldn't just take their product and tweak it for the European market. That is quite different. It was more how they did the embedded experience. And this company is also like another one that recently got funded. It's called Jupit, a bit smaller. They focus on credit unions, which is specific in the US, not on the bigger banks or vertical SaaS, but they focus on credit institutions in the US. So we definitely learned from them how they work, what their SDKs look like, and what their APIs look like. And a lot of it, of course, revolves around payment processing and payment data, because that's a big part of what they do, invoicing data and so forth, that they get from the platforms into their solution. So they were definitely an inspiration for what we built, but then we had to build it from scratch and specifically for Europe. So we took them as a starting point, but then quite quickly it diverged from what their product looks like versus how ours works.
Makes sense. And Mark, when you founded Sprinque, it's probably fair to say like embedded lending maybe was not completely big, but I think probably if you compare now your starting point with Sprinque and embedded lending versus now starting embedded accounting with Thread, probably with embedded accounting, you're a little bit earlier in the trend. How does it feel now, like comparing the two, like doing embedded lending while there is already some kind of movement now versus like pushing something completely new? I mean, people talk about the first mover advantage or maybe sometimes also the second mover advantage. How do you feel about that if you compare the two?
I'm not sure. It is not always good to be the first mover in something. I learned it also at my previous employer, where they were very much against being the first mover, because that means you also have to pay for educating the market. So I do feel that. And that is also one of the reasons why we decided to go direct and have embedded, just because it will take time to educate the market. And we do know people are looking for solutions, also banks particularly, but obviously as an early stage startup, we're not an immediate fit as to partner with those kind of institutions. What is different is, of course, that we don't yet have the financing element and the credit element in our product, which was really the complicated part in Sprinque, right? Because we had to finance the transactions and set up the whole financing structure with SPVs and external lenders. It's just very costly. and obviously very risky business, not easy to scale. And that's quite different from Thread. We see this as much more scalable and much easier to internationalize than it was with Sprinque. And of course, it's just much easier to build products, right? We can be much more ambitious on product and on speed of how quickly we build product and how comprehensive we make the product versus what we did at Sprinque. And obviously, we don't want to lose focus and we don't want to just go try all kinds of stuff, but we see how quickly it is to integrate data sources, to launch new features, to launch new agents that do specialized tasks and so forth. It's just much faster than when we built Sprinque. We needed a much bigger team, so we can stay much more lean now than compared to how we built Sprinque. It will go quicker. So yeah, we see this as much more scalable and much faster, and we can operate with a much leaner organization than what we could with Sprinque. So it's quite different in that sense.
If I read between the lines here, maybe you're building the foundation with embedded accounting, with Thread that you needed for Sprinque to doing the lending. So maybe in a couple of years, you will find cracking the embedded lending market as well, just from a completely different angle.
It's inevitable. And whether it is the partners that do that, if we work with a bank or with the vertical SaaS, whether they use that data then to tailor lending products and credit products to those customers and also how they time it when they offer these products to which business, that's clearly part of the case. Whether we do it or whether the partners we work with, that we enable them to do it, for sure. Lending and credit is critical for SME. So this is, and if you have real-time data and all that insight into the company and how they're performing and what they need at different points in time, it's perfect for that use case.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anything that we forgot? Maybe there's some final advice for SaaS founders, for builders out there who are currently contemplating to go into the accounting direction or how they should deal with it. Is there any kind of advice you can share?
Advice? That's a good one. I mean, the world is changing very fast. So I guess you have to start. You can wait for the world to change, but you just have to start, take action and start building and see what works and what doesn't work. I think there's still also a lot of hype out there and promise there. That's why we were very keen to start with building the product, because we wanted to show that it was actually possible to create a system like that with relatively little resources and a short amount of time to build this from scratch. And so I think, just the advice is we just get started. And if people want to learn about accounting, we can do demos. We can show you the live platform, how it works with real data, with real companies. And we would love to have a conversation with you, how we can help you.
If I remember correctly from the last episode, my typical last question, how can people get in touch with you? You said it's LinkedIn. I guess it has not changed.
No, LinkedIn for sure, but also on the website that you can book a demo. It's directly linked to my calendar. So you don't even need to talk to me or email me or message me. You can just directly book a demo in my calendar on the website.
I'll make sure to add it to the show notes so people can find it there.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for joining. Thank you for explaining a little bit more. Embedded accounting has been a term which, of course, has been around now. Also, my newsletter covered it in the US and stories in the US and from different angles. It was quite interesting to hear what you are building together with Manoj, your co-founder that you also built with Sprinque with. So looking forward to what's there to come.
Same here. And thank you very much for having me back. It's really an honor and I really enjoy it. And I love reading your newsletter. So keep it up.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you so much. And until next time.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, make sure to follow the Embedded Finance Review podcast in your favorite podcasting app. And if you know somebody with an interesting embedded finance story to tell, please let me know. Until next time.